everyone. Welcome to the Accelerate podcast, where product leaders, portfolio leaders came on to share their best practices and learnings and tips around building product scale organization, as well as accelerate outcomes. Today, my guest is Noah Daniels, SVP of Market Development at Simpson Strong-Tie, leading digital solutions and AI strategy. He oversees the market development, customer experience, as well as product management. We're going to cover a variety of topics around how his organization bring in AI into practice and build operating model around it. Can't wait to get started. Obviously, we're going to talk a lot more about AI and people think about AI, start from task to do a complete work as agent, and you start to orchestrate work, quote unquote, from SDLC to like a PDLC. But then the next thing you know, right, it happens before you know it is you're going to do operating model. You're going to do portfolio. And therefore that's constant. When you're building this, if you start thinking about that and you don't have to revamp, right? Because right now, a lot of companies kind of have to revamp how they do tasks itself to go to PDLC. Right. The next revamp is going to be even harder because you already build all the things around that. And I think it's a good time for this conversation to happen. Really lead to how company would think about it, and then really just kind of dovetail into we want to call this a podcast. We call it Accelerate Podcast. Okay. And really think about accelerate multi-front. Accelerate obviously delivery, accelerate a PDLC, accelerate product to market. That's the first part. The second part, accelerate, is accelerate outcome, right? Because eventually. We know you have to build outcome and also accelerate people because, if you every day work on things that's not interesting or, it's a very manual, that's one type. But the other one is you ship product, didn't make an impact. That also not accelerating you, right? So we are, I guess, 3 tiers accelerate what you do, accelerate the outcome, accelerate, individual and organization to really be more fulfilling in what you do, time put into it.
I like that.
Yeah.
I like that. So one thing, thinking about that, one thing I think is really important for us and what we're doing is Simpson is a 70-year-old manufacturing company, and we're industry leader when it comes to connectors and hangers and in the building industry. Like we have phenomenal brand, and we just have great products and great structural engineering, and we have a lot of digital offerings. So to your point, when we think about accelerating, what are some of the things we have to accelerate? So one of the things we have to accelerate is just innovation. So this large topic called innovation. So one of the things we're doing right now is we're saying, okay, in order to accelerate innovation, and I love the fact that you use the term operating model. Like I really love that because, there's a couple of terms that we wind up overloading: operating model, ontology, strategy, platform. But the reason we overload them is that they're really critical terms. So an operating model means, to me, many pieces that work together. So our innovation operating model has 3 kind of tiers to it. You mentioned 3 tiers, ours is a little different, but 3 nonetheless. The first one is around psychological safety. So inside of a company like Simpson, we want people to be comfortable learning. It has to be okay to learn. So you spend a lot of your time talking about AI. I spend a lot of my time talking and learning about AI, but that's not true for everybody at every level of an organization. So what I'm finding is pockets of deep domain expertise, and then pockets that they can spell AI, and that's maybe it. And what we want to do is we want to accelerate. So the first thing we've done is we've created a project called Project Blue Box, which is fun, right? So we go back to somebody on the team, obviously is an Apple fan, find some Project Blue Box, but that's around psychological safety, where it's just about learning. Right. And so part of that is, hey, Becky, it's okay to learn new things, okay to start wherever you're at. And we want to create this culture. In the old Spotify model, we might call it a guild, right? We want to create a community of excellence where people are able to learn. Okay, that's one. The second thing around accelerating that's so important for an organization like us is really being clear around what are the guardrails. So one of the things you mentioned is there's all these new capabilities, and as things evolve, it's just the proliferation of ideas. And now we have, I was literally talking to somebody yesterday, and I was talking about doing something simple, and they said, oh, we should just build that. I said, well, hold on, time out. I don't want to get back to we're going to build a bespoke everything for everything every time. That's really difficult from an operational perspective. So figuring out, and I'm not a big fan of gates. I don't like to go slow. I like to go fast. I've always liked to go fast. I like to go fast. In fact, almost guarantee to get me to figure out how to do something, say you can't do that. And I'm like, okay, well, then that means that's what I'm doing. Or we don't like gates. We like guardrails that are safe.
Right.
So what are the acceptable, data use policies and tools and guardrails and what's out of bounds, and then make it safe. So now you have a learning culture and you have guardrails. Now you can go really fast. What we're finding on the product space is that my product management team, I've given them a mandate like everybody else in the industry. I've said, I don't ever want to read another PRD. I don't ever want to read another requirement document. You have to have them, but I
Right.
refuse to read them. I'm done.
Right.
You need to bring me working prototypes for everything.
Right.
Well, that's fantastic. It's really awesome. The problem, of course, is there's just prototypes everywhere. So we also have to figure out, to your point, of how do we get those prototypes to production very quickly.
Right.
And so it's all three of those. It's creating the psychological safety in an organization to learn. It's making sure that the guardrails are clear. And then it's being able to go really fast from idea to market. To your point, to drive outcomes.
Right. It's a very interesting, you mentioned that the learning part of it. I think, I can see your pattern here is one is the speed, then it also is like how do you move through the phases of a speed, right? So like if you don't have the safety net, then people may not want to take a risk. They may want to do things because they feel like it's good enough. That kind of slowed down, right? Because of that, that's like the blocking element to it. But then when you think about the learning, it's also to say, until you learn, you can't really move fast. So there is a part of that sort of like a back and forth on you do have to invest something before you can do the next thing.
You do. And the other big part about the learning for me, and a lot of this is personal because I care a lot about people. My experience is people are where the differentiators, right? Like at the end of the day, people are where ideas come from. And so we have to make sure people, do I want 20 people who are very deep, or do I want 1,000 people that are going fast? And so part of this is about really the breadth of people. And we have to be able to bring people on a journey no matter where they're starting. And that's one of the things I'm noticing. I had a guy, not that maybe a few months ago, who was in a sales role, and he contacted me. He's like, well, how do you keep up with all of the changes? I said, well, you don't. I mean, there's very few people are keeping up with all of the changes. I said, but we have to be able to learn and regularly be exposed to new techniques and ideas and capabilities, and we can think about how to apply them. But you have to be able to join that journey no matter where you start. And to me, that's how an organization, because to your point, there's like task, I'm going to trivialize this, like task automation that you were talking about. Huge, love it, great, awesome, but kind of a little bit so what? There's that. Then there's acceleration of outcomes you were talking about. Okay, I like that a lot better, right? That's more than just what did you do, that's what did you impact. Like that, we want that to go fast. But there's also like this higher level organizational velocity, right? So for us as a 70-year-old company, one of the big challenges we have is that a startup with Becky and Noah together, and we burn through some number of tokens, and that's our credit card, max out our credit cards. We can actually create a fairly valuable point solution in a very limited amount of time. We're a big company. How do we compete with that? We need task automation, we need outcome driven, but we also need organizational acceleration. We have to be able to accelerate how fast can we pivot, how fast can we deliver, how fast can we respond, how fast can we defend. And so this learning is really around that organizational velocity, right? How fast we learn.
Right. You brought up something very interesting, so I want to double click on that. So like you said, you started with the task automation, right? So especially when we're in the product development, let's just say that's coding, right? Coding is probably one of the things that became the fastest, right? And like every system, when there's it was an equilibrium at some point, right? And if it's the one thing changed, that means that the entire system is actually have to change. And then you will say, where is the next bottleneck? Because you're gonna go flow with the line of least resistance. So you go to the next bottleneck. So what we have, like you mentioned a few things, like maybe you can do prototype very fast, but then how to take to production? And then even for engineering team, maybe one team is very fast, the other team is slower for whatever reason. And then if you have dependencies, then your flow is blocked, right? You like there. Sometimes it's at the in the testing phase. Even though you can automate all the testing, but eventually you're gonna still have the user test it or something. Maybe go to market part of things gonna slow down because you have to do, I don't know, training. You have
Right.
to do, if you're gonna go to the stores or whatever, that there's a lot of long tail of very slow things, right? How do you guys like identify them? How do you address them?
Yeah, it's really interesting. So I love the way you outline that, right? As a flow, kind of an end-to-end flow. So let's break that down because my experience is it's actually a little bit inverse. We started with a lot of automation acceleration on the very far side closest to infrastructure. So if we go back a few years and we think about the originally was like we had tech ops and then we had DevOps and then you've got site reliability engineering and infrastructure as code. We kind of started down there. Lots of acceleration in kind of provisioning, right? So think about AWS. So everything's about how do you provision faster so you can deploy faster. And then we just cranked on deployments and then automated upstream, upstream, upstream. So a couple of things for us. So number one is we have all those downstream systems basically in place. And so now the spot for us to really optimize is idea to deployment. And the way we think about it is we break it into 4 phases. All right, high level phases. Number one is, okay, all that opportunity assessment, all of the research that goes into that, all of the PRD development and validation, all of that can be built into sub-agent systems to deploy, to do research and go faster. Now,
Right.
the danger that I'm seeing is we wind up with a tremendous amount of content, and sometimes the signal to noise ratio gets off. So
Right.
there's some optimization in that space, but that's number one. So now you've lowered the barrier of entry. So idea to ready to execute, much, much shorter. Great. Then you validate it with a prototype, and then we need prototype to deploy. And there's all kinds of hyper build systems that we can leverage that helps us do the plan better, to your point, do the code better, build testing agents. Now that's much faster. Now, what's really interesting, and I'm not sure if this is everybody or just my industry, our big challenge is customer readiness. How, because I mean, it sounds silly, but it's a real thing. We want to, we all love, I don't know if you're a hockey fan, but I'm going to assume you're a hockey fan. I'm French Canadian. I'm from Canada. So if you're
Yeah,
from Canada, you have to be a hockey fan.
that's right.
I'm from Quebec, but I grew up in an age where everybody's idol was Wayne Gretzky. And Wayne Gretzky, our favorite Wayne Gretzky quote is skate to where the puck is going.
Right.
The challenge is we want to be one step ahead of where our customers are going so we can help bring them to a new, more efficient way of driving their business. But if we're 2 steps ahead, there's a adoption readiness problem.
Right.
So to your point, where is that bottleneck? It's really around making sure that the business, we're in a B2B business, making sure that we're aligned with one step ahead of customer appetite as we streamline the pipeline. Otherwise, we're producing outputs that aren't driving outcomes because they're not being ingested.
Right. Right. You're speaking really, really cool thing, a few things, right? I think we don't think as much as a digital product, which is a feature, right? There's no equivalent of a shelf, but there's a shelf, right? When you ship something not being used, that's basically on the shelf, and then there's decay, right?
Yep.
And that's a real thing, especially with the AI. Then you could have more things a customer. It's not unusual. Most of the company we talk to right now that customer readiness or getting customer ready and getting customer adoption is a big issue because just getting their internal support team, sales team, all these guys up to speed, get the things to use, like that is not like this yet, right? So that throughput is not there, let alone you have your customer user guide and customer, adoption driving, all that stuff is not there for sure. And you mentioned a word that's like I don't like the word as much, but it's real that we use all the time also is aligned, right? The thing is this, right? It's a web in the product development. Everything is interconnected. So you can draw a line from an idea all the way to the end to the customer, but the line is not straight line. It's tangled to something else. And then you can pull the web, right? And that's not that I try to promote Dragonboat. In many ways, that's why Dragonboat come into play, right? It's just because all these signals and entities, they are connected. Like you said, if I don't really know, I become 3 steps ahead of the customer,
Right.
then all this rushing, it didn't really matter because you're rush up and wait,
That's right. That's right.
right?
And you rushed up and wait and it's on the shelf. It's not just non-value, it's
Right.
deteriorating value.
It's decay. Yeah, it depreciates very quickly for the product there. And then even if like a one person use it, and that person has feedback usage, and then you have to solve it. You can't let it be bad. So all of a
Right.
sudden you're working on low ROI items from a customer perspective because you put something out there that it's low usage.
And what's really interesting, so just to kind of, you said double click, so we'll use a mobile analogy, right? So we'll tap on it. So what's really interesting though is that the speed of which new ideas can come to market is unprecedented. Like you and I and a credit card, and we are a startup, and we have
Right.
a product. Like today is Wednesday, next Wednesday we're launched, and
Yeah.
so amazing. From a customer perspective, the number of signals that a given customer might get on any problem is a huge. I mean, it's always been lots of products, but it's more.
Yeah.
And they're almost all branded AI, right? So one
Right.
of the things I've noticed, I was just talking to a company yesterday, and they said, "Oh, our AI," and I said, "Well, explain to me what it works." And it turns out there's no AI at all. I'm like, "So you're just running a routine through lists?" I'm like, "Yeah," and they're like, "Well, yeah." I said, "Okay, but it's branded AI
Right.
magic stuff." So now we're just another signal in this really crowded space to the customer. So to your point, if we're thinking about how do we get outcomes quickly and what the barriers, how do we differentiate our signal in that noise? Right? That's key. It has to be some way, because otherwise it just winds up on the shelf.
Right. We definitely heard different practices, but would love to hear from you guys because you're like contributing to that too, right?
Sure.
What are some of the things that you definitely highlight some of the challenges companies face all
Sure.
the time today, especially today? So
Yeah.
there's a signal to noise ratio completely out of whack, not only just from what you like internal working, prototyping and research, right? That it alone. The other one is just on the market customers and in general, everything is bombarded. So people will try to figure it out and that definitely make adoption even harder, which is already a bottleneck. So
Right.
what are some of the things that you have been like
Yeah.
absorbing and doing and that's working
Sure.
or working?
Yeah, so we're really fortunate at Simpson. So Simpson, we have a few things that are really playing to our advantage. Number one, our brand. We have phenomenal brand recognition in our industry. So in the residential construction in North America, our brand is synonymous with our hardware products, similar to Kleenex and facial tissue, right? So you say, give me a Kleenex, it's a brand. So we have great brand recognition. That's number one. Two, phenomenal relationships. So the customer base that we're targeting and the depth of our relationships is unparalleled. We have 70 years of this ridiculous over the top customer focus. I mean, it's when I first came here, I was amazed at some of the stories I would hear. Somebody would meet a customer at a kid's soccer game who said that they had a problem, and the next day, by the time they get home, there's a shipment of what they need. I mean, it's just
Ah,
ridiculous focus on customers.
right,
So big relationships, big brand, and then finally the last part we have is phenomenal expertise in our domain.
right,
So because of that, we have access and we can really leverage those relationships to deliver our value. So I think we're actually really uniquely positioned if we can accelerate the pipeline or the web, to your point. I like the web analogy. So
right.
we optimize that and then we leverage those relationships in that brand. Well, that's something that you and I in a credit card in a startup can't do. We can't go get 70 years of relationships next week.
Right. I think a relationship and domain expertise go hand in hand, right? I think that's the part where, as much as some of the product can be produced and over a short period of time being able to get adoption, it's because the domain knowledge and the customer knowledge needed is just relatively shallow, right? But for certain products, especially in B2B product, the understanding of the customer and then also, again, people say, what is your um, competitive differentiation now coming to play is the vertical domain knowledge that
Yes.
can rebuild into your product and the AI is accelerating that realization of a domain knowledge, right?
Yes.
Regardless, it's the shipping the product, solving the problem, or the technology will make things that couldn't be done before be done. But you
Right.
have to ground that
Right.
on the customer relationship as well as the knowledge of the customer,
Right.
right?
And
At the depth.
and if we go down that thread and we fast forward, so let's fast forward. Neither one of us have a crystal ball. So I don't know if we're fast forwarding 12 months or 24 months or 30, depends on who you ask, but we
Right.
fast forward some period of time. So as technology gets better and better and better, and we see, to your point, more systems and products being developed with fewer people, we're able to do more. At some point, the differentiation becomes that data we have and that context. Now, again, I don't know when. I suspect not 20 years, but not tomorrow, somewhere in between.
Right.
That context becomes the huge differentiator. And
Right.
so we have short-term now type activities that we have to execute on that deliver outcomes, real outcomes to our customers, real value to us as a company. Fantastic. Then we have midterm where we really, to your point, start thinking about that web and the interdependencies and platform and how that all works together. And then longer term, how do we expose all that context in a way that can be consumed? Because I hypothesize that regardless of the industry, everything from you can think of, in the next 3 years, we're going to see much more self-serve, bespoke, in-house developed solutions. And what's going to be missing is access to data and context.
100%. I totally agree with you. And I would have just kind of would have said, if I would have take what you said and it I won't say expand, I think it's implied that you have already, right? Part of that is about yourself. Like a company, they know ourselves, how we work, where our knowledge, so that we can work even better because managing a web is not something humanly
Yeah.
as humanly can do very quickly,
Right.
right? So having the web in the structures, that's one part. The other part is about your customer, customer not just need a physical product. Like every customer, every industry, every company is a digital to some extent, if not,
Right.
depending on the type of business. So now how you enable them is you enable them sort of the digital print on how they use the product, how they drive up. So then you have these two things where AI can only be good. AI and technology, let's just put those two together. It's basically the same thing, right? They're only as good as what's underneath it to power them, right? So if they don't have that, it won't be there. The sooner you can make that available to yourself, to your customers, the sooner they can have things on top of it, right?
That's
Regardless if it's a general purpose LLM or something building house or something externally. Because the operating system in a company, sales and marketing and product, all these are like their operating system, they run their part, but they do have to interconnect. Then you start formulate that connection, right?
100%. And that's true internally for the way we operate, organize, and automate and accelerate. And it's true for how our products fit into their ecosystem and
Right.
helps them accelerate. And to your point, I hypothesize that the day of like little one-off point solutions is challenged. I mean, we're not going to get out of it, but more and more and more, we're seeing interconnectivity, right? I mean, that is going to be the watchword.
Yeah, that's definitely true. We already see that, like you mentioned earlier, like when you started the sort of the speed and automation journey, you started from the back end, right? You started the DevOps and provisioning,
Right.
and then you kind of move up front because they're interconnected, right? So you
Correct.
work on each part of it, and that's just even more true. I think in the past that people would think about like those are us in silos, right? They all think about the operations in silos, a
Right.
functional silo.
Right.
Now it's the orchestration. Now, the way we think about it, the orchestration is like from a task to like an outcome. And then we are Dragonboat is like outcome and investment, right? So
Right.
in the way that, like you mentioned earlier, when you have a lot of signal to noise, and then
Right.
where do you invest become
Right.
the other part of it, right? That part, I would say human judgment will be very much in the loop, but doesn't mean your decision will all depend on paperwork and spreadsheets, right? Because your system would give you that.
Sure. Sure. So since we're being recorded, I want to make sure I said not depend on spreadsheets equals I love Becky. Thank you. Yes. Yes. I love that. Thank you. Um,
Like I love spreadsheets. Like, if there's like the best software ever, I would say personally that's like a really spreadsheet because it's a it's a basic a pretty like a low code programming tool and it's
right,
so flexible you can do anything because it's always the programming involved, right? But I
right.
think spreadsheets is good for individuals, but it's very difficult to
And that's the point. Exactly. It's very good for individuals, but it doesn't scale.
right.
Right. And as we go through that, what we need is we need that same concept of like kind of this low code, low effort, flexible, does anything, but at scale across. So, like one of the things I was thinking about when you were talking about is marketing is a great example. So, when we're thinking about our web, how does the marketing arm work? And to your point, if we only think about terms of like product, like idea to outcome or idea to delivery, we have to think the whole way through. And it does, it goes in every direction. It's good.
I know that's great. Like your title is perfect, right? You have your digital solution, not just product management. You
Correct.
have market development, you have the customer, you have the product management, and that's really a great way to formulate a role that covers like the from an outcome and a touch point level, right? Tell me a little bit how this role come about actually.
Yeah, fantastic. So um, the journey inside of Simpson for Digital has been many, many years, lots of acquisitions, homegrown applications, a variety of different offerings. And the product management organization kind of grew up through acquisition. So I've been here 3 years and I was VP of engineering first. And so in the engineering dimension, I ran all the normal things you'd expect, UX, QA, dev, everything product. And then we bifurcated to really be able to focus. I took the customer facing teams. So that means all of the customer experience teams, so training, implementation, account management, customer support, all that type of space, all of the market development, which is around the go to market motions. So aligning with the sales team, the marketing teams, everything that's outward from that perspective, and then product management. And so one way to think about it is, what are we going to solve? What problems are we going to solve for what customers? How are we going to solve them? Then how do we deliver it and how do we support it? And then I have peers who are on the delivery side of how do we deliver it. So we run entirely as a atomic and autonomous group to deliver digital solutions.
That is really cool because I really like how this org structure create, like when you think about it, that I think you probably heard a lot of this collapsing of roles, right? And especially with AI and also with the speed we're having. So not only you have product management, engineering, QA, design, the traditional PED
Right.
view, right? You add the documentation customer. That's really good because until then, it's all cost, right? Until it get to the hands of the customers and being used, everything is cost. So
Right.
that's really good. You actually get to the hand of the customer, and then the marketing as well, because that's also related, right?
Sure.
Get out of the hand of the customer. Does it automatically make them use it or make them, yeah. So this
Right.
really, really good way of thinking that realm. How does it compare to other companies where you see the pros and cons this process? And that's the first part. Second question I would have is, does it change any of your, we can call it PDLC or like a value delivery? Share a little bit of what.
Yeah, that's a great question. So how does it compare to others? It depends on what industry you're in, but generally speaking, you would see a lot of the market development roles be closer associated with the sales team. I think that's a more common incarnation. So you
Mhm.
would see that piece be more sales, whether it was go to market motions in sales or rev ops, but it's generally over there a little bit more. CX would usually be its own org because a
Right,
lot of times you see a customer experience leader. So depending on the org, you see CX embedded in a revenue team,
right,
right? And so you'd have two of my teams that might be embedded more in revenue teams. And then the product group, which to your point would usually be coupled.
right,
So here it's a slightly different view. It's really around, the what and the why and then the how. And
right.
so we run it as one organization. So I have a peer and we run it together as one organization. Your second part of the question was really around how our operating model works. Fun. Our operating model is consistent. Now, if you go within a given function, there's going to be differences, of course. But in terms of our operating model, like at least on the main product dev type delivery model, it's a very traditional kind of a Spotify one-off, just like people do Scrum one-offs. It's the same thing where we have persistent teams around product who deliver. So that part's pretty consistent. The
Right.
part that's evolving is how do we bring the market dev and CX into it more, right?
Right.
Because Becky, the power here is feedback loops. The power
Right.
is how fast can we get, because there's an argument to be made that I'm going to pitch in and see if you buy it. What I've heard is the argument of why Amazon became so successful. One of the most critical attributes was rapid feedback loops. Okay, we'll leave that out there for a second, but let's just pretend we believe that. By having CX, market dev, product, and us all together, that means we can get a lot faster feedback, right? More direct feedback quicker, which means we can make sure we're solving the right problems. That to me is a big differentiator.
Right. And I 100% agree with you that when you stretch the line too long and then too many handoffs, people tend to focus on what is immediate and now, right?
Right.
And then not that they don't think about it, there's no forcing function to drive that. So then it's true, especially in today's world, when the bottleneck is actually on both ends, it's not necessarily in the middle. So if that feedback is slow, you just stretch even longer, right? And especially when all these functions are under one leader, so you're intentionally like that sort of there's a certain organizational, regardless of the tension or motivation or the some sort of force or kind of ground these groups together. And I think it's really good. I really think how that would evolve for some of other companies. I think I've definitely worked in the companies where product and quote unquote business work fairly closely. And I was very lucky in these companies. I think these companies tend to perform much, much better when product is kind of like an engineer in the back office and living the Jira lane. Sorry, Jira, but in some ways the tools kind of limit what you do, right? That does make you more like on the cost side versus a business, the customer, and the investment ROI side.
And I think it depends a lot on the orientation of the company. If it's a sales-led organization, then getting close to sales matters.
Right.
Right. I mean, getting close to sales always matters for sure. I want to be clear on that. My point is it maybe matters more. If it's an engineering-led organization, of course, being close to sales matters, but it's a different distribution of company.
Right.
And not good, bad, just different.
Right. Hunter, it's the nature of the business and the environment you operate that make a difference. And also, I suspect companies engineering led probably less of a sales, probably is different go-to-market motion as well.
That's right. Yes, that is true as well.
Yeah. It's very very fun to think about that as well. So I have one question around where do you see this is going? Because I think the reason I'm saying that is because we've seen a lot of changes over the years, technology, operating model. I think this is definitely one of pretty major one. The operating model changing because of technology underlying things underneath it. So what are some of the things you've seen industry shifting and then you either adjusting or tweaking that's being proven to be working well? And what are the things you tried but didn't quite work? So then it will be great to say, hey, you know what? We tried this, didn't work. So everyone can say, we don't step in the hole again.
Yeah, that's a great one. So it's an interesting one where it's going. And I think everybody's struggling with this right now, right? Like, how do we get ahead of where this is going? But if I was to hypothesize based on what I'm seeing, there's a couple of things. Number one is, like I said, more customers building their own bespoke solutions. I think that's going to be a trend we see more and more and more. So the good news about that, of course, is that customers can solve their problems. The bad news is if we're a product company or we're trying to deliver a product, now you're asking me to compete with exactly what you made for you. That's going to be a real challenge, I think, for product-based companies. And so the pivot for that has to be, what is the context I can add to your product to drive value? That is going to have to be, at some point, that's going to be the differentiator. If we think about it, probably like a huge SAP ERP system, that's probably not going to be replaced. But anything that's around like business productivity and tracking and all that space is probably at risk, right? So we need to think about context. So that's number one. Secondly, what have we tried? We've tried a couple of things. So one is we pushed the gas really, really hard on product prototypes, really hard. And we wound up with this huge backlog and repository of prototypes with no clear path to production for the customer and no clear ROI per prototype. So that not what happened is our excitement, everybody got excited. Oh my gosh, Becky, I can make my own whatever, right? Hey, I'll go home Friday night and Monday morning, I'm like, I have one. And then Tuesday, there's another one. So that's kind of like there used to be like shadow IT. It's like shadow AI. There's just this proliferation of stuff. So that's one we've tried that didn't work out really good. So now we're trying to put some guardrails around it, not stifle innovation, but maybe just mitigate some of the excitement to value, right? Just kind of like tie it to value. So that was one mistake we made. The second thing I think is we got a little bit ahead of our customers. So I think that's another mistake, which is because we went, and then that, to your point, that adoption, that change agent in our customer base wasn't working quite as well as we needed to, because it's very hard. It's hard for me to, how do I create an appetite for change inside Dragonboat? That's very difficult, right? And so if you and I are aligned, or I get ahead of you, you're like, hey, that's not a priority for me. And now we have a mismatch of speed a little bit.
Right.
So I think that was a little bit of a mistake. I had a third one, but I can't think of it right now. So
It's so funny you said this too, or I've heard quite a few times. You didn't mention the ones that are, maybe they are under your org. We definitely heard tensions between product engineering org and the go-to-market, especially sort of the launch team. They
sure.
just never feel like they given enough instruction, they give enough information, and they get, caught sort of in the middle, say this thing go to the market, people already start using it, we have no idea what's going on. And it's very interesting because these things happen in the past, right? Before the AI, and the AI just amplify
Correct.
some of the traditional like handoff friction.
Right.
Like because each function would have their capacity, and then when one part is spiking, the other not.
Right.
That's the friction, and AI can spike certain of them. So it's kind of very interesting to hear that part as well. And I think that so how do you solve it?
Yeah,
Any
that's right.
tips on solving that?
Yeah, that's right. One more thing I was just thinking about around this, which I think is a challenge to your point. I really appreciate your point about that amplification. So one of the things I've noted is, and I don't know if this is true, I'm going to figure this out, but I hypothesize just the number of words being produced is at an all-time high. And the consequence of that is, you have an idea, you write down 5 bullet points, you use your LLM of choice, and you create this incredibly verbose message to me. I get the verbose message, then I decode it on my side to bullet points, and we hope that our communication is working. So when I think about that chain going to the go-to-market teams and to the launch teams, so now we sometimes confuse volume of communication with effectiveness of communication, and it runs the risk of making it worse. So let me explain. We have more things we're trying to launch. There's more words to digest to get to what we actually need to know, which actually makes the launch slower. And I think that's a very real problem. I don't know how we solve that yet. My initial hypothesis and what we want to focus on is core teams, right? Core teams, because to your point earlier, handoffs are slow. And if we take a handoff and we just have 3 in the process, and each handoff has bullet points to verbose text to decode, to verbose text to decode, the probability of alignment is extremely low. I mean, it's just, it seems like we're doomed. So part of it is collapse that. You got to collapse that to a function.
Right. And that's where, we call it a source of truth is really important because, instead of LLM to interpret for you and become a lot longer, more, it is true, right? We already have a telephone game, lost in translation. We call it intent decay. But it's the things do decay, even you amplify like a lot of words, right? I think that's a really good call out, which is that the handoff is the friction and the high risk point. Yes. Regardless, it's the one part you expand capacity that become the bottleneck for the other, or the loss in translation, because when you have a third party LLM, which is unpredictable, right? And it's a highly confident, but it's a low.
That's right.
It's
That's
a,
right.
I'm very confident, but it's the really the real accuracy is the opposite of that. I think those are real things that we need to adjust our operating model, right? To say, can I go back to the original one, and how do I make sure that lost in translation not happen? And definitely, I hear you, and I think um, it's exciting time,
It
right?
is exciting. It is
Bring
exciting.
in new progress and an improvement. And then the other part is to say we also adjust just because we see new friction, new challenges that wasn't there before.
Right.
And accuracy become more important. And
That's
then
right.
I think intention way to say not gate, but regulate how
Mhm.
much things you flood the system or not flood the system
Okay.
so that you actually spend energy on the right thing. And I don't think anyone wants to have lots of prototype and not having any results. Not exciting if it
Right.
doesn't go to the hands of a customer or it
Right.
doesn't get used.
Right.
So the
Right.
regulation of that is not really governance, I think. It's balance out the flow.
Guardrail. It's guardrail. And I also just the one thing I'd add to that is also depends on timing.
Mhm.
Depending on where we are in our maturation and adoption, lots of prototypes and lots of excitement and lots of learning might be the right thing for a
Right,
while. Not
right,
forever, but for a while until it isn't.
right, right. 100% agree. Any takeaway you want to add before we wrap up?
No, this is really good, but I think, now I'm going to make a product plug for you, which is as we're thinking about kind of Dragonboat over the course of time, one of the things that would be really interesting is how does that platform help make sure that the right signal is getting surfaced? To your point, as there's more and more noise around each one of these flows between idea and kind of outcome at the very end, we want to make sure that the signal is being placed on the right thing. So the analogy you and I love is the relay racers. There's four relay racers with a baton. At any given moment, 50% of the capacity is sitting idle because we're optimizing for the baton around the track, not resource utilization.
Right.
Same thing here. We're optimizing for the value delivery. We're optimizing for the outcome. And so that surfacing the right signal becomes more important as there's more noise in the system.
Right. And I really want to double click. Thank you for asking that question. The way we see it is this: data is meaningless if they are not having meaning, which that's why the way we build Dragonboat is to think about that is the operating model. If you want to use a fancy word, we call it ontology, right? So the data from different elements of your teams and function department, no matter how they evolve, they will have meanings. And that meaning will prevent loss in translation. You can
Yeah,
see those different objects. That's
I
number
love
one, right? Number two is that, like you said, if you have a really race, there will be people on the ground running. There are people not on the ground running. But that's also the moment where you can do the other things,
right.
because the other things are also important, regardless is helping the other parts that you do your research, right? Because in the past, it was very linear. I do research, or I do coding, I do this, right? And my capacity is optimized for that flow. But
That's right.
now with this, graph-like thing, then you have some of the flow, right? The things go. And then
Right.
you have your time to do other things, because prepare, learning, experimenting on
Sure.
your part, it also takes time, right? So you don't need to spend 100% of time to do production. You can
Right.
spend 50% or less. But
Right.
because you can see the flow, everyone can see, then you say, oh, I have more time. I can do more research. I can talk to customer everywhere you can go. So that's how we see it, is that we give you that meaning of your operating data,
I love
where
it.
anyone can get a sense of where you are, where others are in relation to where you need to be, so that
Yep.
you can spend your time to do things. Some of them are on the ground running, some of them getting ready.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. That's good. That's great.
Cool.
Perfect.
Well, thank you so much, Noah. It's so much fun. It's a lot of progress and a lot of excitement. Thank you for sharing your experience. And
Absolutely.
I would
Absolutely.
love to hear more and learn more.
Yeah. Well, here we are. Have a wonderful afternoon, and we'll chat soon.
Thank you, Noah. You too.
Bye.
Thanks. Okay, bye.